close my eyes, and I see her round, beaming child's face before me. I feel her thin arms, clothed in white silk, reach up around my neck. She is warm and light and soft. I've never felt a woman surrender herself so completely to me. I know that this is sin, and yet this is the only time that I feel pure, washed, clean, that I achieve a kind of purification, absolution. She weeps as we make something like love. She leans forward over me, and I am baptized again in her tears. When I am with her, I think of Guinevere. But when I am with Guinevere, I think of her, Elaine. As I stood in the chapel perilous, and I saw the black hand extinguish the light, and I heard the voice speak to me of my sin, I thought I knew what it was saying to me. I believed my soul had no price. I sank to my knees in shame for my sin, and yet I couldn't stop sinning even in that moment, for I lied and lied and lied. I repented of my sins before God and prayed to him to take these vile, wicked thoughts from me, but something in me deeper still whispered, just not yet. Just not yet. I was so certain of my self-knowledge then, so certain I knew what my sin was. But now I have no such certainty. I know that I need absolution, but I no longer know what I'm looking for absolution from. I never harmed Guinevere, and she never harmed me. But together we destroyed every life we touched. I wonder now, perhaps my sin was not in being with Elaine. Perhaps my sin is in not being with her. But I couldn't love her. I could never love her. I'd used up all my love on Guinevere, and that love gave my life purpose and my universe meaning, so I could never love Elaine. No matter how desperately I loved Elaine. Maybe I don't want to be forgiven. Maybe I want to be punished. Maybe that's just about the most selfish, egotistical thought I've ever had. I remember when she ran toward me, curls bouncing round her round, beaming child's face, and spoke glowingly of a child, took my hand and placed it over the center of her being, speaking, practically singing of our shared life within her. How could something so pure and good as my son became have emerged from such evil thoughts as I bore? It is said that the demons we do not slay in our own time we pass on to our children, and I had seen the product of Arthur's sin grown to manhood. I was granted the opportunity to know my son as an adult as we sailed together on the ship of Solomon. Yet even then I spent half of our journey in fever, babbling with delirium. I never knew my son as a child, never taught him arms, never tended him when he was sick. And yet he tended me so gently, as if he were the father and I were the son. When I awoke, I found dozens of scars drawn across my left breast. In my madness, I'd attempted to carve my own heart out of my chest. I've never been a man given to dramatic gesture, but I suppose I wanted to be a father to him. But when I saw this man standing before me, so wise and so strong, I could not speak. How had he escaped the sin that had so easily consumed my own life? How could he understand the questions that I had been struggling with since I first came to Arthur's court? I could not speak, and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead. I had no wisdom, but constantly sought after his. I asked him the questions of my heart and said, "Oh, my child, what have I done? You frighten me more than I can say. Please help me try to figure out how things came to be this way. Was I wrong to love you as much as I did? Would you love me if I had hated you more? Tell me the answer so we can go back to the way things were before. You have an answer to all I can say. I don't know what I can tell you. You've done all you can to be true to yourself, and I don't know how to compel you. But it's not my pain that troubles me. I have lived with my suffering long. I fear what you will do to you if if you find that you are wrong. There is one way in which you err, to think that I know not of fear, but how can I teach you how to survive when I myself am barely alive? Every child hates their sire for not passing through their fire. And Sigmund Freud, the dear old doc, was just a man who loved his cock. The two of us alighted and came to the castle of the Grail, but I was barred from its presence. As I approached, they pointed at a ring on my finger, this ring which Guinevere had given to me, and ordered me to cast it aside. I refused. I laid my hands on the door, and it burned me. Not the metal, but the sin within the flesh that touched it. I never entered that sacred place, but I peered in through the window as my son Galahad knelt down alongside my best friend, the womanizing Gawain, and that bumbling backwater buffoon, Percival. A young woman entered, clothed in white silk, and revealed the cup that held the blood of our Lord. My son's eyes rolled back into his head, and he gave out a cry, in Manus tuos Domine, and fell backwards into death. And I looked upon the vessel without fear. I saw the cup that held the blood of God. I looked upon the most sacred symbol of God's sacrifice for his children, the living vision of hope for mankind, and I felt nothing. My son, a young man in the prime of strength and beauty, looked upon this vision and fell backwards into death. I looked upon it and saw a cup. A crude clay vessel, one that I could pick up at any corner shop. So who was the fool? My son or myself? Which of us saw with eyes of wisdom? Did he create a truth where there was none, or was I unable to see a truth that existed right before my eyes? Either possibility was terrifying. One meant that God had denied me his forgiveness, and the other meant that there had never been a God to absolve me of the sins that I bore. It's in that moment that complete despair settled upon me, that I realized that whether or not evil existed, the world was full of terrible truths which I could not bear and could never overcome. It's in that moment that I knew what Paul of Tarsus felt on the road to Damascus, the moment that I achieved the revelation that defined my existence. I am not a stupid man. I realized that there could be no purpose, no meaning to the universe, but nevertheless I found my truth. It's the thing Mordred doesn't understand, the thing he can never understand. My truth is this: that if there is no God, that everything is determined by random chance, that there's no great grand revelation at the end of existence. If that horrible truth is the only truth that exists, then the only truth that has meaning is the truth that we choose to give meaning to. Now, Mordred believes that this knowledge frees you to do whatever you want, but it's not that easy. It's never that easy. If it were that easy, I would have figured it out years ago. I'm a man who hates death and loves peace. That's the truth of who I am, whether there's any meaning to those words or not. If a moral purpose is to exist, then we must create that moral purpose for ourselves. That was Arthur's gift to us. This is why the decision to be a good man is so critically important. I realize that the world is an evil, evil place, but I choose to live not as though the world is what it is, but as though it is what it should be. And perhaps if enough of us do so, it will become so. If there is no God, then that decision becomes the most important thing in the universe. If nothing else matters, then that's the only thing that matters. Yet I returned home and fell into the arms of Guinevere.